my guest, Mary Margaret Olahan, who has a new book out, Detrans. Mary Margaret, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I've been very excited about this book since you told me about it some time ago. It is Trans Tuesday, especially for Pride Month. We try to focus on trans issues. I feel we just don't talk about them enough in our culture, you know? Tell me a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so this book is, it's a reported book about detransitioners, young people who tried to become another gender and then realized that that's ultimately impossible and went back to living as their biological sex. But there's so much that goes on in between there, right? We know that these are young people who are deeply troubled, who are really struggling with mental health issues, who had to ultimately get their parents to sign off on all these procedures. They started puberty blockers, hormones, underwent surgeries. We're really talking to all these gender activists online, interacting with adults who are pushing them down this route. And after they ultimately transitioned, they went through a period of realizing that they had been betrayed and manipulated. And now a lot of them are speaking out and saying, I went down this path. I had no one to tell me that this was so dangerous and was going to affect me so deeply. So I want to be the one to tell other people what I've experienced. And I felt like it was a really important story to share in a book format because when they'll go on TV, let's say Chloe Cole goes on for a Fox hit, she's only got about 2 minutes to share what she's been through. And these are some really vulnerable, intimate moments that we share in my book, Detrans. And I wanted to really give people a good insight into what it's like for these kids that are being pushed down this path and what their background is like and what causes them to do this. And I felt like a book was the best way to do that.
I think it was Chloe Cole who posted a tweet. It was some detransitioner said, "It's been 4 years since my breasts were taken from me. I'm 19.
Yeah.
I thought that really put the whole thing into perspective. When I think about all the stupid things I did and all the ideological rabbit holes that I went down when I was, forget about 15 or 19, when I was 22, when I was 24, and I think, wow, had there been permanent consequences to those flights of ideological fancy, I could be toast. I could be done for. And right. So something I really love about your work, Mary Margaret, is you've taken an unusual path for a conservative journalist, because most young conservative journalists decide they're going to debut their work with their grand theory, their own original political economy, and their explanation of everything that's ever taken place in the world, and a bunch of pontificating and a bunch of puffery and preference and opinion. And you've done something very unusual, which is you've gone out and interviewed people and just reported facts. It's so strange in conservative media. You never see that anymore.
Yeah, you don't see that a lot anymore. And I think part of the reason is that the internet has made everyone feel like they should have an opinion on things and that anyone can become the next pontificator with the biggest platform. But I think that what I have found with reporting is that people are really hungry for the truth. People really care about facts and realities, and unfortunately, establishment media doesn't give that to us anymore. So if you look at the way that the New York Times or the Washington Post reports on this issue in particular, they'll try and tell you that the regret rate for transitions is under 1%, which is a lie, and it's also kind of a funny lie because that's based off of people who identify as transgender. So less than 1% of people who identify as transgender regret their transitions. Well, they identify as transgender, so that's not super surprising. And then when we have all these detransitioners who want to share their stories, these establishment media groups are just not that interested in telling them. And so I found whether it's, abortion, marriage, family, gender, COVID, people really care about the actual facts of the matter. And I think it's been advantageous for myself to just tell people what's going on and then, go on to the next story, and grateful for people like you who are way smarter than I am that can tell people what we should be taking away from this is. Because that's, there's Ryan Anderson, Abigail Schreier, they'll do the real nitty gritty analysis of this issue. And my hope here was to just tell people the stories and show them what's going on.
I love that, because I think now, it's crazy to say, many people, maybe most of us, know someone who's gone down this rabbit hole. At the very least, I think pretty much everyone knows someone who's gone down this rabbit hole. It's very often young people who now I think the starting point is you're a lesbian. You know, if you go to college, you're a man or woman, you're just a lesbian. That's the kind of normal starting point. And the question is, are you going to be a they, them, or a this thing, or what? Are you going to identify as non-binary, or it's so prevalent. And these poor parents have no idea what to do. They have no idea how to deal with it. It's an exploding social contagion. You've seen the identification with this ideology triple within, I think, a matter of about 5 years. You now see, 2 years ago, it was that over 20% of Zoomers identified as LGBT, LMNOP. Now, today, it's 30%. And so, you know, it was already crazy. It was already 1 in 5 people. And then you saw a 50% increase in just a couple of years. It's exploding everywhere. No one knows what to do with it. And I think your book is very important to say, hey, you know, if your nephew is considering going down this rabbit hole, more likely your niece maybe if it's a young person, you say, hey, here's this book. Here's Detrans. Here's what it's really like. Here are just the real stories. I'm not giving you right-wing propaganda or a tome of political philosophy. Here's what the people who have done this say it's really like. Just read this before you buy your kid the hormones.
Exactly. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of little segues in the book to help people understand how this process works. For example, I'll get into Planned Parenthood offering hormones, how they're profiting, what their officials are saying about that. I take a little side trip into Dr. Gallagher, who's this plastic surgeon in Miami. I think a lot of us have probably seen some of the videos that she posts on her TikTok and on her Instagram showing her patients before and afters, young people who she'll operate on and try and glamorize these really horrible, graphic-looking surgeries. And so I try and give a really good journalistic perspective on all of this and just to show people, here's the whole situation. Here's what each of these young people went through. And then I also end on the story of Abby Martinez, who's the mother of a little girl, Yaley, who ultimately took her own life by throwing herself in front of a train. And I think that's maybe the most emotional reporting that I have ever done. I had to sift through the police report from the officers who found Yaley's body on the train tracks. And it's just one horrific description after another. You know, they found a sneaker here and a here, and just a horrific, such brutal descriptions of this poor girl's death. And Abby cried to me on the phone. She told me this is a pain that never goes away, and she wants people to understand what she's been through as a mother, watching her daughter go through this. Her daughter was taken away from her by the state of California, put in a foster care system. They okayed her gender transition, and she began taking testosterone and took her own life. And get this, Michael, when I was writing this book, I reached out to the guy who signed off on her gender transition because I had the documents. I can see the California official who said, okay, she can begin testosterone. And I called him. Weirdly, he agreed to an interview. Usually these people don't agree to interviews because it doesn't make them look so good. He agrees to an interview. And I asked him, so why did you sign off on this girl's transition? And do you regret it all that you did this, considering she took her own life? And he could not remember who she was. Couldn't remember the story, couldn't remember any of it. And when I finally got a little bit upset and said, how do you not remember this? Is this something that happens all the time? He literally told me, we have many, many, many cases like this. So this is just becoming the standard in cases like California. And I included this story, even though it's so sad and, you know, very upsetting, at the end of the book, because I wanted people to understand the alternative. The detransitioners who are at the beginning of the book, they made it. They are doing advocacy. Thankfully, they are living, you know, happier lives. They're going back to normal, and we hope they can retreat into privacy and, you know, be okay. But this is the alternative. If you do not make it and you do not have a support system, and you do take your own life as a child. And so, you know, it's really sad, but I thought it was important to end on that note and to help people understand the realities of what this is, because these are mentally unwell young people. They need help, they need compassion, they need care, but not this that our so-called experts are pushing on them. They deserve better than that.
Right. This is what I think about when it comes to something like homeschooling, because I wasn't homeschooled. I was I went to public school. My wife went to public school. We met in public school, actually. And so I thought, is it such a big deal? Maybe I'll send my kids to public school, or if we can't find a good one, a good neighborhood, maybe we'll send them to some private school or whatever. But we're talking about something totally different here. Because one, homeschooling has exploded in recent years, especially after COVID. But two, when I was going to school, guidance counselors and teachers weren't going behind the backs of parents, giving cross-sex hormones to kids that will lead them statistically very likely to kill themselves. That wasn't even a thing you could imagine. And so when I was weighing the pros and cons, I thought, well, I don't know. It's going to be hard to maybe get the kids to be a little more social or something. I said, oh, right. But the teachers in the homeschool won't try to castrate the kids. This is such a shocking phenomenon, right? And it's so dangerous, because once you start going down that rabbit hole, especially if you're an impressionable little kid, the results, as you point out, are always bad along the way, and can be totally disastrous. Whatever parents are thinking of for their own experience as a teenager or in school or being uncomfortable in their bodies, and how we are in a completely brave new world here, and it's very important for them to get the facts. So everyone needs to go out. All of that to say, everyone needs to go out and get Detrans by Mary Margaret Olahan. Mary Margaret, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank all of you for being here in the Crème de la Crème. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. See you tomorrow.